despite all of the real K-drama going on in Korea right now, we also have to give credit where credit is due to the K-drama that is sweeping the world once again. The most watched show on Netflix of all time, ever, in any language, was Squid Game Season 1. Season 2 premiered last week, and it broke more records. It became the most watched show ever in a premiere week. So if you're wondering, the record breaker that it beat was Wednesday, the readaptation of the Addams Family. Well, Addams Family, that Wednesday show, is still the #1 Netflix show in English, but of all time and in any language, and beating even Wednesday, is the Squid Game phenomenon. Is season 2 everything that it's cracked up to be? Why is season 2 also getting some sort of criticism in terms of the way it's made? So I'm going to break it down for you. By now, you have probably seen the show. This is going to have spoilers. So we're going to talk about the beauty and the ugliness of Netflix's Squid Game Season 2. So Squid Game Season 2 already has over 68 million views in its debut week. It ranked #1 in 92 countries, so it broke the record for the most amount of views of a show in its premiere week. It broke into the most popular list in record time. Season 1 is the most watched Netflix show with 265.2 million views in the first 91 days, and that beat out the #2 show, which is Wednesday, with 252 million views. But why was there still criticism against season 2, and how was it able to perform these amazing numbers even amongst some of the criticism? So first of all, I do think some of it is justified. Some of it was, I think, a technical or scriptural, problems in the script. But other than that, I believe that we're at a different point in the story. And there is a problem when you're killing off all your characters. You got to reintroduce some new ones. So the number of episodes in season 2 is only 7. In season 1, there were 9. There's going to be season 3 released most likely June of 2025, so in about 6 months from now. And a lot of people are saying, and I agree, that season 2 ended almost as if it's season 2 part 1, and then we're going to get part 2. And I like that. I like that because we're in a new streaming era. Everything doesn't have to be so cut and dry, with a complete season, and then, next year it's on, TV. With the streaming, the scheduling, I think there's a lot more flexibility, and if it makes the production of it better, I'm all for it. So Squid Game continues along with this theme of this question of good versus evil. And what season 1 I thought did so well, and why it captivated everybody, was that it had at its structural root games that you can understand. So there's a easy feedback loop of a dopamine of you see somebody play a game, and the games were good. It was well produced. It was adrenaline thumping. However, at the same time, why those games compared to any other games? I think what the Squid Game really showed us was a game that you wouldn't ever really want to see happen in real life, and hopefully it doesn't really happen in real life, but What you do want to see from it, I believe, in a non-grotesque, perverted, non-perverted way, is you get to see people confront real truth about themselves in that pressure cooker environment. What will you choose to do? Will you choose to sacrifice somebody else? Will you choose your own life? What are the stakes for you? Do you value, letting somebody else live? Are you going to take revenge? When that girl remember that girl who grabbed that other dude and said oh no, honey, you done with me. And she are you going to be one of those? Or are you going to be hey, I'm going to purposefully lose at this game so that you can go on and live, and save your family? Those are these life and death questions that actually, I believe, help us in our own lives reflect and grow. Number one, if we do go through it ourselves. However, we don't want to be in that extreme situation of, well, if you are in there and you're I want to learn about myself, I want to know, but then the mistake is that you just die. Most likely you're not going to choose to be in those types of learning labs. So the closest we can get to it is this simulated fun way of looking at it, but still the grotesqueness, but through the grotesqueness, the truth. And then we really do learn about ourselves and human nature. Now, season 1 was, I think, very clear about what choice that was, what somebody was choosing, how that all played out, and what it meant in a very artificial way of a game scenario. And then going back and looking at season 1, that script was tight. That script was focused on action showing character. There was not a lot of waxing poetic about anything. And it was focused on letting the game show us who these people were. And it focused more on beat to beat to beat. It was just adrenaline after adrenaline after adrenaline, or sadness, or even the pauses were intense because it was a lot of action driven. So in that sense, I would say that it was actually artificial in its construction because it cut out all of the dead moments mainly in that world compared to season 2, which I'll get to. And so through this sort of artificialness, we got to see people's real face, boom, in our faces on the screen. We knew who these people were based on their choices, not what they said about themselves. Now, what was different in season 2 was there was a lot more talking and amongst the characters. And what I thought was different about season 2 was, in some ways, it was more real. It was more of a documentary. The dead time between the games, or between when you're supposed to go up and press the button to vote. There was a lot of talkie. And in some ways, I thought that was interesting because it showed more of, what would it really be in prison, the kind of the downtime, or if they're going to do, The Office, but for real, it's your office. There's going to be a lot of quiet, boring moments, and not just from moment to moment to moment to moment. But in that way, I thought that was interesting because the overall tone of season 2 was sort of what do you do in that dead time where you're on a mission, but that mission is taking a lot longer than you thought it would, and there's a lot of waiting around during this time. I thought I was just gonna be, boom, 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 just going in, with sword and shield raised to my revenge. Well, I thought that was interesting how we're in a season 2 atmosphere. And so we're in a different part of the story, and we're at the part of the story where Ki-hoon, the main character, Lee Jung-jae, is looking to get his revenge. We saw him at the end of season 1 with the cliffhanger, and it wasn't a cheap cliffhanger, thank God. Yes, thank you, talented writer, Mr. Hwang. He didn't do a cheap cliffhanger of like, is he gonna get on the plane to go see his daughter and, leave this world behind, or is he not? No, it was more like, bring. Oh, heck no, we're burning this sky bridge to the Korean air. I'm going and hunting you down. And that was the cliffhanger. Well, what I in some ways respected, but I understand. So this is where it's kind of like, the pacing was a little slow because they're taking a lot of time to try to find their opponent. If you actually look, though, when I looked at the minutes, I was like, they actually did do a good job. In season 1, by the 30-minute mark, they were in the game. They started the red light, green light game. And what was very slick about that season 1 was they got straight to the game. And then everybody, remember, went home. They voted to end the games and then they went home. And then we had more of the backstory of the characters and they all decided to go back to the games. And then boom, we were back into the game. So that was an interesting way to resequence so that you can get some of the backstory a little bit later after like, oh, this is what this show is about. And that's one of the games. Okay, thank you, preview. And then they did the character backwork. Season 2, when I looked at it, it felt like it was dragging, but when you actually look at the minutes, they're very efficient as well in the script. It is done well, and it is produced well, and 30 minutes in that show feels like 2 hours. So in some ways, that's why it sort of dragged. However, we had him start off trying to find even the frontman and trying to even find the people to get his revenge on. He's just spinning his wheels. And I thought that was interesting to show because, not all revenge. You want revenge? It doesn't happen right away. It's going to take time. You don't even know what you're doing. But I thought it was really cool to see like what world he created and created that hideaway and called the Pink Motel because, he's going after the pink guards. And then when he had that, whole area of weapons and his whole shooting target range, I thought that was really cool. But what was different and the challenge, I think, in the script in season 2 was that there was a lot less action showing character and a lot of characters talking to themselves. And this is my actual real criticism of the script. And it had what is being called the Netflix-ification of a lot of scripts, where people realize you are looking at these Netflix shows while you're cooking, doing errands, or doing something, so your attention is not always there, and you can't catch it, if somebody closes the door. That means something, like you weren't paying attention, like you were trying to find the Clorox. And so a lot of the characters are saying what they feel, saying how they, mean about something, I am going to tell you, so that you can just hear like, oh, she angry. Oh, and she about what? Oh, because she had this, backstory, like they're telling you. That is not the way you're supposed to be writing, especially in the medium of film and television, where the visual is going to save you like 4 paragraphs, but they're saying all the 4 paragraphs. And in some ways, that's what was happening with this script for season 2, a lot of talkie-talkie. And the reason why it doesn't work as well as action is that you don't know if you can trust when people talk about themselves or they're talking about other people because they're having their own interpretations and opinions, and especially if they're not in a stressed situation where they have to basically act their truth, confront their truth, like reveal their truth, you don't know how much spin and fluff is in this story.
I don't know what the fuck are you talking about. Fucking crazy, man. Stop it.
And then the only other really big problem that I thought was not really anyone's fault was just the technicality of season 2. You got a lot of the bigger stars. You stunt cast with so many huge celebrities and stars, and they sort of needed their own time. Now, in season 1, Lee Jung-jae was the main character. His story was the main plot line that all the other characters, even though it felt very ensemble-y, it was his story and everybody was supporting him in the storyline, and actually even in probably the production of it, where Lee Byung-hun is literally the same A-list level of Lee Jung-jae. Yet he didn't even show his face until, I believe, the second to the last episode. So that's how much even Lee Byung-hun, the huge the guy who stars as the frontman, huge star. You can go on for days debating on who's the bigger star, Lee Byung-hun or Lee Jung-jae. Like, and you probably couldn't even get to an answer. Yet Lee Byung-hun was willing to, chill out and show his face to like second to the last episode in season 1. Well, season 2, everybody who had some name in Korean celebrity fandom needed to have their glamour shot sequence, and that slowed things down, I believe, even like in the visual storytelling of it. And it was, I think, a compromise. Yes, you want to see Top doing his moves, like kind of like doing his mugs, and then like,
I don't know what the fuck are you talking about.
but that takes time. And there were so many, I believe, unnecessary sequence shots, but they were more like fan service shots that you needed. Or there was a lot more of argument, probably from maybe the stars teams trying to get more, dialogue time, but it ended up being more dialogue instead of action. And so that, I believe, kind of drained some of the energy and momentum of some of these characters, because you don't want to, like that scene between Lee Ha-jun, the police officer, and the mother talking about Lee Byung-hun over dinner and why he may have disappeared. Like, y'all was gossiping about another character who is literally in the show, and you didn't do even like a sequenced a flashback of you enacting it out. You were talking about it. That I thought was like one of the low moments, but usually budget, when you have no budget to actually shoot the scene you're talking about, oh, remember in the past? Well, instead of going to the past for all of us, you just talk about it because you saved a lot of money. And then you give them a lot more screen time. Lee Ha-jun, even the policeman who was not a huge star in season 1, became a huge star. So then in season 2, he needs to have all of his, big screen time. But remember, like before Squid Game, like the most, I think this was probably the most popular video of him on the internet.
좋습니다. 박수 한번 부탁드리겠습니다. 박수.
And yeah, there's definitely squid in his game. And so now he's such a bigger star, he had to have more time. And when you kill off all of your characters, there's no continuity even in the co-stars of Lee Jung-jae, or, number 4, 5, 6. There's no continuity there, so you have to reintroduce all of these co-stars, but these co-stars now are all trying to be like starring roles, which, legitimately they deserve, but I can see now why Mr. Hwang, the creator and writer, is just like, I'm sick of Squid Games, because he's probably thinking like, how am I going to juggle all these divas teams like demands, even if the main celebrity is not the one pushing and being a diva themselves. Like their team might be like, we need to have more script time. And then when you have like all of these executives, looking at this as an investment, a lot of times in Hollywood, you have these people who think that they're also, just because they are part of the whole production, beginning to end, but they're not writers, and not a lot of them even know like the difference between screenwriting, TV writing, playwriting, novel writing. and emails. And so like there's like, you know, the infamous notes that executives always give. And if it's not like super clear or we don't understand the black backstory, the worst case scenario I can imagine is like some executives like, well, it'd be great if we had a moment here pausing between the mother and the son talking about the other son, why they have this trauma and like why, you know, what explains their actions, and just lay it all out there. That is the worst TV. And thank goodness the actors were so good that it sort of covered up some of that part. Now that's the criticism of that. But overall, I thought also this was a very different way of talking about the story, because I think the story has evolved. What is the main difference of season 2 versus season 1 at the core and the essence of the story? I believe this is actually a good thing. Season 1 showed that people were vile and predictable in their savagery. When you really push comes to shove somebody, everybody is like some animal and is gonna look out for their own survival and will betray anybody to succeed. Season 2, yes, you still had elements of that, definitely, because otherwise that will not be a real Squid Game. However, you're seeing cracks and you're seeing an alternative, and especially when you see Ki-hoon, who wants to end the games, come in there and just stop it all, shows that there is a different modus operandi that is completely different from the people of the Squid Games. The people in the Squid Games, they're the ones that organize it and watch it, just believe that humans are just trash creatures that are predictable and we should just look at them for our amusement. But the way that Ki-hoon starts to show is that no, actually they're not all predictable, and they're not all vile, and they're not also individualistic. What we saw in season 2 was cracks in the people who are the elite workers of the game. So we'll see the frontman, which is Lee Byung-hun. He went in there as like a saboteur and like a double agent, and he still did end up, yes, doing his job in the end and double crossing. But along the way, you can kind of see like, you know, he's kind of questioning this. You can't lie to yourself anymore. Just say like, well, they're all this way. They're all trashy. So there's no reason to have any kind of moral pangs about it. So we're seeing, I believe, in Lee Byung-hun some moral pangs. But remember, Lee Byung-hun is not like these weird, you know, Kabbalist people that they showed in season 1 as the VIPs. He was an original normal person that went into the games and won, and then just ended up working, you know, at the summer camp after like being a camper for like maybe many seasons. And so we also saw Kong-yu, the salesman, also seemed to have questions about whether he could be morally blind to this games. So this moral blindness, this feeling that like, oh, I can do whatever I want, don't have to feel bad about, you know, being a part of the Squid Games because people are trash. I think the frontman also started to doubt, and why could, because, okay, number one, why did he end up just, you know, offing himself? Fabulous performance, by the way, but maybe too fabulous, because it sort of didn't seem like what was going on actually though. And did the script actually show it, or did Kong-yu have to, you know, pick up the ball and, you know, get it across the finish line? Because it didn't really make sense. It seemed to me that maybe he had reached his limit, that he didn't feel comfortable doing this job anymore, because it wasn't so easy anymore to see people so crassly and demean people, Because when he got the bread and the lottery tickets and went over to the park, which was, I think, very accurate, by the way, and I loved how they got the cicada sounds in the summer. That was so real to life. But when he went around there, he wasn't recruiting. So if he was just doing his job, if he was doing that for his job, then he would be recruiting these people, but it almost looked like he went there for his own amusement, or not even amusement, but just to prove to himself. And he knew he was being followed by the two gangsters, maybe to show and prove to both himself again, remind himself and feel like, okay, yeah, I'm right for doing this. And especially with these people trying to hunt me down, well, I'm going to show you how, these people deserve it. And so I thought that he was doing that more for himself to make him feel like this is the right thing to do. But then, he had the tantrum of like, well, most of the people actually did pick the lottery ticket and did what he thought was going to happen. And then he had a tantrum of like, you guys did this, but it was too much of an extreme response from someone who, if you knew smugly, like, okay, most people, they're going to pick the lottery ticket, even if they're starving, because that's just how vile people are, then you wouldn't have to go through this whole big show and then at the end get mad that they chose the lottery tickets and not the bread, and then, feel bad about that. There's something about that I think he was beginning to crack as well. And so a lot of this environment in season 2 was cracking this notion that these games are justified. So obviously on the surface, Lee Jung-jae, Sung Gi-hoon, he wanted to go into, ostensibly just stop the games. Then you had Lee Byung-hun and Kong-yu. It seemed like they're kind of questioning the legitimacy of what they're doing in some ways. Not 100% concluding that, they're wrong, but there's it seems like there's something going on. And then the actual participants of season 2 seemed a little bit different. Season 1, they definitely seemed super desperate, and a lot of them seemed like they had been screwed over. And I believe in season 1, season 2, and in general, the participants of the Squid Game, in general, the statement about society is that, like, when you trust in the system and you trust in other people, you get screwed over, and sometimes you get screwed over big time to a place where you are in such a desperate situation, and that's really unfair. And then you have all of these people who are like the VIP cabal people toying around with that situation, that they're creating the conditions of a high price for being screwed over in a trustful environment where human nature and societies are really built around trust, and then making fun of people for trusting when that's actually the normal human thing to do. Where season 2, those people seem to have gotten in there more from their own carelessness or their own greed or screwing over other people, but not all of them. So, but we're seeing a little bit more of the lackadaisical attitude of the participants in season 2, like the careless people who kind of wandered into dire straits, rather than people who like really earnestly got there. It had more of that tilt. The other thing I didn't really like about season 2 was I think they spent way too much time on the voting thing. And the voting thing is not a real game, because it's just, and it's a statement. So it's not necessarily like, when you're really pressured into this situation, like how are you going to act in a life or death environment? Even though in some ways, yeah, that choice of going on with the games or not is life and death, it was just way too much talkie-talkie, way too much kind of repetitive, kind of like, going through this vote. And a lot of people saying why instead of showing why, they decided to make a certain action. And so that was, I believe, a bit of a lost opportunity, but maybe it was the climate of 2024 in the production of it all, like with the election in the United States and then even in Korea, and the importance of voting and all that kind of stuff, which is true, but it'd be nice if that was kind of more truncated. They could have squeezed in another game. And so I think that was also kind of the issue with the difference of season 2 was that there were fewer games, and then there was that whole it suddenly turned into like a Rambo, like shoot 'em out, like machine gun, like kind of blow up the game type of a turn, which I thought was also an interesting way of moving along into a different type of genre within the Squid Game universe, so that there was a little bit, I guess, more of like a shooting kind of a thing. But that, I think, is a risky choice because people come to watch Squid Game for the game and for this kind of almost creepy nostalgia-ness of transforming a childhood game into some kind of deadly consequence, and then showing us like how to play these childhood games and that whole thing. And then how when you're in that moment, life or death really shows the truth, and there's nothing more powerful on camera than stories of the truth. And so I thought that was a little bit of a lost opportunity because we can see a shooting them out, bang bang, like in almost any other genre. This Squid Game world is the only place you can see Korean playground games turned into some macabre but thrilling and truth illuminating life or death game. Now, I heard there's going to be an American adaptation of Squid Game. More power to you, sure, fine, but please do not turn it into some talkie like John Malkovich, Quentin Tarantino, like late 90s era Pulp Fiction-y type of rehash. Make it new and modern, because I'll tell you, that scene with Wi Ha-jun, the police officer, and his police officer boss while they're eating jjajangmyeon, or the black bean noodles, and Wi Ha-jun just had to spit. You can tell, like, him, even as an actor, he's just like spitting out these lines that he thought was like weird, but it had totally had like Pulp Fiction quarter pounder with cheese or something vibes with John Travolta. That sequence that seemed to only work with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson in a Pulp Fiction, like, back in the late 90s. But
you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
It just seems so trite and just self-indulgent, like, oh, I wonder, do you like vinegar on the noodles, or did you like vinegar on the onions? Like, I was just like, oh, good Lord, quarter pounder and cheese, could you take this dialogue out? And I loved how the other actor, who was so like, such a Korean actor, probably never seen Pulp Fiction, just like, trouncing over just like that, what a good nonsense, and like, let's get on with the scene. I really liked how he did that. But that would be interesting to see also an American version. You better get in the dentist, the health insurance, the property insurance, the homelessness. I don't know, there's like the real American terror. Okay, don't be glossing over it with some funny business. All right, guys. Well, what do you think? Did you like season 2? Are you looking forward to season 3, which is essentially part 2 of season 2? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.